Hello, and welcome to Road to October, a librarian's review of horror literature. I'm so excited to do this as our first show. Thank you for joining us. My name is James Tyner. I'm an adult services librarian with Fresno County Public Library. I have an MFA degree in creative writing, actually a published poet if you can believe it, and I absolutely love the horror genre. Grew up, kid of the 80s, grew up horror. I remember spending afternoons at the mall and the bookstores there and looking at all the horror novel covers, and I was always just so enthralled by them, in sci-fi and fantasy covers as well. The artwork was brilliant during that time, but it's something that I've always enjoyed and that I've always loved. I loved horror films, going to the video store and getting the next scary movie and watching it together as a family, and been reading Stephen King since I was probably too young, but I absolutely love the horror genre. To take it a little bit further, the idea behind this program, as a librarian with your coworkers, a lot of us will have certain tastes. We like certain types of books or movies, and you go to your coworker often for help, for guidance. So you want to recommend a book to somebody. I know this person over here is really into mystery books. That's who I would go to and ask, maybe recommend a book. Well, I was always the go-to for the horror genre. Over the years, I found that people are somewhat kind of embarrassed to talk about it, but almost everybody loves it. So over the years, I get asked over and over again to recommend books, horror genre books. So that's where the idea for this show came from. So this is the first episode. I'm sorry for kind of the long introduction, but the hope is just we want to set the stage, and from here, after this, I won't give you such a long introduction as today. But thank you so much for joining us. We're going to talk. Each episode will be dedicated to a book. Generally, it'll be novels, but I'm going to switch it up occasionally. I may talk about a short story anthology, because there's really good short story anthologies, horror anthologies out there. Fantastic stuff, and we'll get to those. And occasionally, I will throw in some graphic novels, some comic books. There's a few in this first series that we're going to do of these reviews that I can't wait to get to. I got to keep it a secret for now. And also, I'm going to throw in a couple nonfiction books. That'll be a little bit down the road, but there's a few that are pretty scary, and I think you'll really enjoy them. So I'm going to throw some recommendations out there. So we're going to start today. Our first book, sorry if that reached there, is going to be Man with No Name by Laird Barron. A subtitle on it is Nanashi Novel. So this is a really interesting book. Just to go into this, it's a very short book. It's a novella. It's not a full-length novel. Very short. It's a quick read. I think I read this in a couple of hours. Really interesting stuff, though. And before we get too into it, I want to talk about the author a little bit. Laird Barron. Laird Barron was born in 1970, I believe. He was raised in Alaska. He actually ran that Iditarod race. If you ever see a picture of him, very interesting-looking individual, really neat guy, really great writer. Has an eye patch. Almost reminds me of a Hemingway character. And it's interesting because you'll see a lot of those ties in his short stories. He's more well known for his short stories. He writes mostly short stories. He has very few novels. One of them in particular, one of his novels, is called The Croning. He sets up sort of, for lack of a better word, his own mythology, and it ties into a lot of his novels. So you read his novels and you just read his short stories, and you'll see a lot of the same images start to show up again and again. He definitely threads it together. But again, he's most well known for his short stories. Award-winning, very well known. He writes in the genre of what we would call cosmic horror, which is a subgenre of horror that comes originally from H.P. Lovecraft. It's sort of this fear of this unknown, that there's something awful and ugly just outside the distance, and if we see it as human beings, we usually can't handle it, and that's the end of things. And you're going to see that theme quite a bit, not only in the work of H.P. Lovecraft, but in the work of Laird Barron. Another thing I want to say about a lot of his characters, when you start to read some of his short stories, and then it's going to come up in this novel as well, he has a lot of very, hard-bitten characters. You're going to see a lot of noir-type characters, a lot of detectives, and soldiers, a lot of tough individuals that he writes about. And again, kind of threading back to the idea of Hemingway, there's similarities in the characters that he creates, but really tough guys, and then are in these horrific situations. Another thing we'll see in a lot of Laird Barron's books, including this one, is the idea of reality, and they become very surreal at times, which is a balance towards these very hard-bitten real-life characters, these tough guys, for lack of a better word, balanced against this weird, surreal. So you have the very hard, very realistic kind of coming up against that surreal and awful and something really bad out there. But it's a really great balance, and I like to recommend his work because one, for people who aren't as knowledgeable with the horror genre, haven't heard of him. Those who are familiar, I'm sure you've heard of Laird Barron. He's amazing, but I recommend it. And also, a lot of his work is bite-sized. The short stories, they're chunks, so you can pick up one or two, read it. And again, going to Nanashi, to this novel, it's very short. It's a novella, a little bit longer than his short stories, but you can read this in a day. It's very quick, and this will give you a good introduction to Laird Barron's work. So I think if you enjoy this, you'll also enjoy some of his short stories, which I'll probably go over in recommendation-wise in the future episodes. So let's go with this. That's kind of introduction to Laird Barron. So let's talk a little bit about A Man with No Name. I'm going to try to keep spoiler-free, but at the same time, I may touch on some things that will give a little bit of things away, and I'm going to try my best to avoid that, but just realize it may happen. And so if I completely ruin it for you, I apologize, but I'm going to try and be as spoiler-free as possible. But a few things might get in there, because I want to throw just enough out to get your interest, to gauge your interest. So this is a Nanashi novel, Man with No Name, and this follows a Yakuza gangster. It's set in Japan. Nanashi, the main character, tough guy. We start to learn about him as the story goes, but essentially, just to give you a little bit, the story is he and other gangsters in the gang that he's in are holding on to this really famous wrestler, and they're escorting the wrestler to this place, and they're using it to blackmail sort of another gang. So that's the setup. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. They're guarding this wrestler as they guide him to kind of a safe house area. And that's the setup. I don't want to go too much further, but we'll say things get a little strange, especially towards the end. And that's basically this wrestler shows Nanashi something. And whatever that something is, it's on a piece of paper. I don't want to give too much away, but he reads this, and whatever it is sort of sets the stage for weird things to kind of progress. It's very tense. The book is very tense, very well written. Laird Barron is a poet. He also has some poems published, and you can kind of see that in his images and his writing. Very short images, very sharp images. Sometimes his writing is sparse, but that's, in this case, it's a very good thing. It builds tenseness, and we don't need to get too much in it. It puts us right into the story. Excellent character building, excellent setting and descriptions. If there's a negative I'm going to say about this book, we have a very Nanashi, the description on the back is that he's trained in the way of the gun and trained in the way of the knife. We don't see too much of that in the book. Again, I don't want to spoil too much, and I'll let you make your own decisions. There is some action, there is. But I just felt like, for me personally, I would have liked to have seen more. Again, that's just me personally, but because a lot of the action does take place off stage, so we don't always get to see all of it. The end is unlike anything I've read. It goes, you'll have to read it yourself and tell me what you think. But again, this is a great introduction to Laird Barron and to the writing style that he is and he does. And I think you'll enjoy this. Also, as a little bonus, there's an extra little short story in the back that's also very good. So, let's get to the end of this. I'm going to give it a couple scores to help you make your decision whether you would like to read this or not. And I'm going to do that every episode. So the first one is going to be creep factor. And I'm going to score it. I know everybody uses numbers or stars. Let's use pumpkins, right? Road to October. 1 pumpkin will be not so great. 10 will be really good. So a scale of 1 to 10. For this one, in terms of creep factor, because I want to talk about scariness, right? There could be some good horror genre novels that aren't as scary, but are a good read. But some people are interested in the creep factor, and some may want to avoid it. So I'm going to give you the creep factor from my own personal perspective to help you make the choice of whether you'd like to read this or not. So for this one, I would give this an 8. The book is extremely tense. It's not horror and traditional things jumping out at you or anything like that, but it's a very tense situation. And that adds to the creepiness. And then the end just goes out there. In some ways it's confusing, but it's surreal and weird and awful, but in the best ways possible. And so for that, I'm going to give this an 8 in terms of creep factor and scare. Simply for that tension. I don't think this is as like an Exorcist where, awful, ugly jump in your face, but there's a real sharp tension. And this is a kind of book that, because of that, I think is definitely worth a second read. So, the writing. Another thing I'm going to score is the writing. So me personally, I really enjoy his writing style. Again, it reminds me of poetry. It's very short, very sharp images, very strong. So because of that, I'm going to give the writing style 9 pumpkins, a score of 9. I think he's an excellent writer. I can see how some may not like his. It is terse. It is short, right to the point. And sometimes he does leave things out. Again, like I was talking about, I personally felt like some of the action sequences should have been more on stage for us to see. But that's all part of the playing with reality and that surrealism and all that stuff. So because of that, I think he's an excellent writer. I'm actually going to give this 9 pumpkins in terms of the writing style. So just something to keep in mind. So did I like it? So here's an odd one. This is not my favorite of his books, even though I know I'm really playing it up. It's good. It is good. It's short, and that adds to the recommendation. I don't think it's his best work by any means, but it's interesting. One other thing I'm going to bring up is that there's a little subtitle on this, and it's a Nanashi novella. So that's telling me, maybe, possibly, that there could be more of these. Currently there isn't, I don't believe. But yeah, great book. Definitely check it out. So, ultimately, would I recommend this? Man with No Name, Laird Barron. I would. On a scale, if I'm going to scale my recommendations as well, I would probably recommend this a little bit lower. I'm going to recommend this as a 7. I think his writing is excellent. I think the story is unique. I could actually see this as a film one day. I think it would make an excellent film. But I feel there are pieces missing, and the tenseness of the writing and the surrealism may throw some readers off. So if someone were to come to me at the library and ask, I may recommend this eventually. This isn't one I would grab right off the shelves and show you, unless they hinted at me that they liked like hard-boiled mysteries. Then I would grab this. So I think there are some people who would like this, but overall it is a little bit tougher than some, but still a really good, excellent book. I would give this the 7 pumpkins, 7 stars, rating of 7. So definitely I would recommend this with some hesitations, but definitely, yeah, I would recommend this one. So good stuff. See if you can find it, read it. It's excellent. If you're in Fresno County, we actually have the book, and you can put a request on it. But thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, if you'd like to make recommendations on books, I'm all ears. You can contact me I'll give you my email. It's james.tyner, that's Tyner, at fresnolibrary.org. I hope you enjoyed this Road to October. We got more episodes coming out every 2 weeks. Join us. They'll be out on Fridays. We have a whole series coming. So many good things to recommend and talk about. I can't wait. If you want to interact with us, you can email me, as I said, or comment down below. I'll do my best to interact with everybody. I really hope you enjoyed this. A librarian's review and recommendation on horror novels, a genre that I don't think gets enough attention. But thank you so much for spending time with me. We hope to see you again. Thank you. Bye-bye.